We're ready to go, Rich.
All right, thank you. Thank you for trying, Brian. I'd like to call to order the Monday, April 5th, 2021 special meeting of the South Kingstown Historic District Commission at 5, looks like it's now 5:40 just about. And I'll have the roll call. So members are present. Shanti Underhagen. You'll have to unmute, Shanti.
Present.
In fact, if all members could unmute, that would save some time. Linda Stedman.
Present.
Andrew Martinez.
Present.
Karen De Silva. Karen is not here. Murray Gates.
Yeah, I'm here.
And Richard Youngkin. I'm here and the chair. We also have guests tonight, which I think we'll note. Catherine Gagnon is here. Matt, I think that's Matt Callahan.
That's correct, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And is that Ann Dennis? Is she here? No.
No, our realtor Norma Kayatsa is here. For some reason, the screen is saying she's me.
All right. Thank you, Norma. Jamie Rabbit from the planning department is here. And of course, Brian is here, planning department, and Andrew Teitz is here, the town solicitor. So we're all very happy you're here. Tom Peterson is also showing up. And I don't know if he's still in his car, but we'll hear from him perhaps. So that's what's showing on the screen. And I just wanted to give sort of an introduction here. We're all happy that you're here. We're going to start with approval of our minutes of February 4th, 2021 draft minutes. Do I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
So moved by Shanti Underhagen. Do I have a second?
Second, Andrew Martinez.
Second by Andrew Martinez. Do I have any discussion about these minutes? All seem to be good to you. Let's have a vote then. We'll do this by roll call. Shanti Underhagen,
Aye.
Linda Stedman,
Aye.
Andrew Martinez,
Aye.
Murray Gates,
Abstain, I wasn't present.
and Richard Youngkin, aye. So the minutes are adopted, approved. And so under new business really for which this meeting was called as a special meeting, I'm just going to read the preamble and give some thoughts. It concerns the property and structural alterations at 2545 Kingstown Road, Assessor's Plat 23-3, Lot 43. Discussion and possible action on a resolution addressing incomplete repairs approved in a 2011 Certificate of Appropriateness and Improvements performed without a Certificate of Appropriateness. So that's sort of the general parameter of this item, our first item of new business for A. And we have our legal counsel here. We can ask questions of him. We have our planning staff here. We also have the owners of the property, Catherine Gagnon and her real estate agent, both here. And I believe Matt Callahan is also here on behalf of the owners of the property. Is that correct, Matt?
That's correct, Richard.
Thank you. So I think what we may want to do for the record is just simply put together sort of a rehash or factual kind of recitation of why we're here, what's before us, and then allow Catherine to have a few words. This is a public meeting. We do want to make sure that the owners have an ability to speak as well as the public at large. So, and I'm just going to reiterate this from my notes. So have the chance
Richard,
to correct me. Yes.
I might just interrupt quickly. Are we expecting anybody else? I have somebody in the attendee list named Hadley. Is that somebody that,
Brian, that's my son who's observing for a school assignment.
okay,
All
go
right,
ahead,
good.
Richard.
All right. So, and this is just a summary. We have, I think the first thing that occurred here probably was my asking Brian this is in the fall, a while ago, to take a look at what I thought might be some alterations to the property. And that sort of triggered, I think, his looking at it a few months ago. We've received lengthy emails from the owner, from Catherine, of 2545 Kingston Road, Assessor's Plat 23-3, Lot 43. And those concern the project and some of its history on this property from 2011 on. And they're all in the record and they're all available for people to read. It's quite a lengthy summary and notes. And Catherine, we'll give you an opportunity to talk about that in a few minutes. We've also reviewed and received copies of the HCC meeting notes that were April 5th of the meeting, April 5th, 2011, the minutes, the actual application forms that were submitted. We've also reviewed the owner's, the certificate of appropriateness that was issued to the owners at that time. And that was quite a detailed project application, and it's all on the record. And I think it's a very clear application too, a very impressive application. The same sort of information was also received from the owners, Catherine and Anne, for the June 2014 review of the porch roof on the east side of the building, and that was also issued a certificate of appropriateness at that time. And the record's very clear. These tasks that were submitted for review and were approved, I think it was understood that they might take some time. And we want to note that there was no real time limitation given in those certificates of appropriateness. And then there is another set of material which we don't really have a record for. And those are the more recent items that were alterations of the exterior of the building. And we're sort of learning more about those. Those include cellar windows that were infilled under the porches. I think this this eastern porch, excuse me, and the removal of historic lattice panels on the porch and their replacement, and the addition of HVAC equipment attached to the exterior of the building. It's a mini split system with piping that's on the sides of the building, at least two sides that we can see, and also the installation of a condenser unit on the lawn next to the porch. So those, I want to make sure that you realize that those items are separate. We don't have any record of a certificate of appropriateness for those items. We do have a record of the earlier items from 2011 and 2014. So I think that what we want to do today is sort of divided into two parts. And the first part has to do with those earlier projects that received certificates of appropriateness and did not have a time limit attached to them. So, and I have a question for Andy in a minute about that. But those projects basically are ongoing in our minds, or in my mind, and have yet to be completed. Some of them were completed, some of them have yet to be completed. So I think today what we're sort of thinking about is the fact that that set of applications may need to be amended. They may need to have a new look on them because of circumstances that are ongoing with the owners and perhaps the property. And the owners may wish to come back and actually look at those applications again and see if the certificates of appropriateness could be amended by the commission. And then we have the other set of applications that well, there is no application for them, the other projects. And those also may be appropriate to have certificates of appropriateness for to be issued. That would require the owner to come in with applications for those particular work items. So actually tonight, if it's agreeable with all of you, because that may be the situation in the future, I think we should limit any kind of discussion that we have as a board on those specific items, because I don't think we want to be in all prejudice in our approach to exactly what the intent is and what we should be thinking when we make a decision, pro or con on those particular items. That's just my thought. What I want to do is I want to have our legal counsel weigh in on this, that in particular, and also on the question that I have, which is really on my mind, and that is, do our certificates of appropriateness, do our decisions actually run with the land? Is this indeed the responsibility of the current owner, or will it become the responsibility of a future owner, whoever that may be? And my thought, I'm not a land use attorney, but my thought is that this is zoning. This is like other zoning that can be placed on a property, use variance, or maybe even a special permit. And that there is a possibility that it actually does, a decision that we make actually will run with the land, will transfer from one owner to the next. That's the big question. So Andy, I hope you'll be able to answer that for us. It may make a big difference in this case.
Yes, this is Andy Tights. And in fact, Brian mentioned that to me earlier, and it really is an easy question. Yes, it runs with the land, both the benefits and the burdens. It is zoning, it's an approval. And so therefore, if they're, now, like any zoning, if someone gets permission to do something, to add something, for example, and they decide not to build it, if they got a permission to build a shed, for example, and then decide, oh, no, I don't want to build the shed, they don't have to build the shed. They can't build a different kind of shed. They can only, if they do want to build the shed, only build the exact same one that's approved or come back into you. In this case here, where you have things that, where you approved repairs and certain items were removed for repair and not replaced, that obligation to replace the repaired original items is still there. And that would be a burden on the current owners, and it would continue as a legal obligation of the new owners as well. So that is the answer to that question. And just coming to what you said before, since I got the floor, I'm not going to give it up easily. I think the first thing to do, I think that would be a good discussion, and to hear from the proposed new owner what his plans are. If the new owner is willing to acknowledge this, that these items are there, and either he's going to undertake the obligations, or he'll come back to the commission and present a case. Why not? I understand there are some things like the balustrade, which was thought to be original before, and now there's evidence that maybe it's not original. But of course, the question of whether it's gained significance in its time is still out there. But that's a whole substantive issue. that should be, dealt with at that time, not tonight, but the question of just that acknowledging that is an obligation and it will have to be dealt with. Either the balustrade will have to be put back, the side lights will have to be put back, or the new owner would have to come before the commission with alternative plans. So I think that's really the first thing. And I think the second thing, I mean, it's not really down here. It's kind of strangely on the agenda, and I was not involved with drafting the agenda, but talks about discussion and possible action on a resolution. The HCC really doesn't have much authority to enact resolutions. That's more of a legislative function. But I do think it might be helpful to have some sort of discussion, if you will, to treat it as just a concept review, if we have time after we deal with the first part. And that would be the opportunity for members of the commission to voice in a non-binding way what they feel about some of the I think the four major items which are still before them, being
Right.
the side lights, the balustrade, the porch lattice, and the HVAC units.
Right. Okay, so thank you very much, Andy. And I think rather than having we don't really know who the new owner is, or if there is a new owner. I think we need to hear from the owners themselves, the existing owners, and not make any presumptions on who is going to be owning this property into the future. That's all.
I kind
That's
of
my thought
disagree
on
with that. I
You
mean,
do?
we do. My understanding is that Mr. Peterson has the property under contract, and he's here at the meeting tonight. So, I mean, if he doesn't close on it, then it will still be whoever owns it. It will be the existing owners, the representative which is here tonight as well. But I would take advantage of, if we know what's happening to it, I would take advantage of the knowledge that we have.
Well, the question also is whether or not, if we decide that, in fact, I think we have come to the conclusion that, in fact, it does pass from one owner to the next, it runs with the land, these decisions. And so it does become, in my mind, something that has to be negotiated between the current owner and a future owner, if that's the pathway that the current owner wants to take. Current owner also has the ability to resolve all of this, before there's any sale. So it's all done in advance. I don't know which way is best. I really don't. I think there probably is a better way. But why don't we do this? Why don't we hear from both of them? I think that's the best thing. And yes, Andy?
Yeah, I said sounds good.
Okay. So I think we'll go with the current owner first, and then we'll go to the prospective future owner. But Catherine, would you like to say a few things about this? You can see that we're sort of headed toward something that would be like a resolution to this, and would it does offer some opportunities, I hope.
Richard, this is Matt Callahan. I'm representing Catherine and Ann tonight, and I'd like them to speak because they're obviously most familiar with the house and the history of the house. But what we'd like to do is get some guidance tonight if we could. I spoke with Andy earlier today and indicated the same thing to him. We're here tonight. We feel as though there are certain things that we may be able to do, certain other things which really we cannot do for financial reasons, or just by virtue of the fact that they're really not appropriate from a historical point of view. So we would like to leave the meeting tonight with some guidance as to how we can resolve this issue once and for all, so that the new owner will understand exactly what has to be done or what does not have to be done in order to comply with the HTC requirements. So having said that, as was indicated earlier, there are two aspects of the discussion dealing with the certificates of appropriateness, and two other aspects of the discussion which have not been dealt with by the certificates of COAs and will have to be dealt with in some respect in that regard. At this point, perhaps Catherine, you can direct your attention to the two COA issues that have been raised with respect to the roofing and the balustrade and the also the sidelights. Why don't you take one at a time, Catherine? Deal with the roofing issue first.
Okay. So we actually did appear in front of the HDC one additional time. That is not reflected in the agenda items of tonight's meeting. We appeared as part of an emergency meeting in the fall of 2011 upon the complete failure of the roof over the 1829 portion of our house. From January of 2011 through March of 2011, beginning of April, we invested approximately $60,000 of our own personal funds in the restoration of the floors, walls, bathrooms, and other critical portions of the interior of the home, personal funds. And then we were advised by then the planning director of the town to, instead of going piecemeal and come to the HDC with like one project at a time over the course of the next several years, to give kind of an overall proposal for those projects that we felt we would probably be tackling in the next set of years. And so that was the origin of the proposal that we had presented in March of 2011. So as many of you probably can imagine to be the case, those projects were kind of the tip of the iceberg with this particular home. And there were a lot of unexpected things that popped up over even the first few months that we had residents of the home. But two of the items that were on that initial proposal had to do with repairs to the balustrade, or what we're referring to as the balustrade, that was in existence on the roof at the time. It was a very rotted wooden structure that was, in the opinion of 4 different roofing contractors, inappropriately attached to the home by 2x4s resting on the roof tiles, and basically secured with a series of bolts to the higher portion of the, whatever that is called, at the very top where the windows are popping up from the roof. So we had intended to repair and potentially scrape down, and fix that. That was the hope in that original proposal. Our understanding of submitting that proposal was that the certificate of appropriateness was the first document that we would need in order to proceed with any of these projects. That it was our intention to hopefully tackle the project, that in time we would come around to doing the project, we would come back for the other necessary permits from the town in order to do the project on the individual items if they were a permittable project. So we understood the certificate of appropriateness as basically being the plan of action that we would be taking in order to make those changes, and the fact that the Historic District Commission was in agreement in terms of the nature in which we planned to execute that project, but that there were certain elements that would have to have further permitting. So we did not know in March of 2011 that our roof was in as bad a condition as it was in. And basically in October of that year, it basically began to fail completely. We had basically a swimming pool in our attic. We had tarps everywhere. And we were in jeopardy of basically losing the $60,000 of personal funds that we had invested on the interior of the property, between the walls, the floors, furnishings, etc. So we came to the Historic District Commission with an emergency meeting. I believe it was in late October of 2011. And we were granted permission to replace the roof. The material, the asphalt shingles, were discussed. It was already asphalt shingled. And so the decision was actually made very quickly that we could replace with the same material. And it was understood and discussed at that meeting that the balustrade would have to come down in order for that project to occur. In the process of that balustrade coming down, the damage to it, the wood rot, the bug rot, was much more substantial than our inspector had indicated. Our inspector was actually up there in the middle of the winter between it was January of 2011. And it basically came down in pieces. We disclosed that at a subsequent meeting in 2014. We came in front of the commission in order to apply for permissions to work on our porch roof, which at the time was failing on the east lawn. And we were granted that permission, and there was a lengthy discussion that occurred at that meeting about the balustrade and the fact that it had literally come down in pieces, that we had preserved one piece of it in our basement for a period of time, that we had some water issues in the basement, and that the piece continued to deteriorate as a result of that water, but that we had plenty of photographic evidence that if we were able to take on that project, that we would be able to recreate it again, if we were ever able to take on that project. It was very clear in all of the proposals that we provided to the town for the initial zoning of this house, which it was always the intention that we would have a business here. It was a bed and breakfast, that the profits of the bed and breakfast would really drive the projects. As funds became available from the bed and breakfast, we reinvested them in certain projects having to do with the house. That included painting, scraping and painting the entire exterior. That included some monies toward the replacement of the heating system in proportion to the number of rooms that were being used for the bed and breakfast, and a number of other things over the years. The funds never materialized to be able to tackle the replacement of the balustrade, the reconstruction of it with either wooden material or some kind of a composite material. We in 10 years never took a salary on running the bed and breakfast in our home. It was a part-time additional small business in our home, and we both have full-time jobs. We never took a salary. And so all of the funds either got turned into the business itself and promoting the business or the projects on the home. So the funds never materialized in order to do anything further. In subsequent years, about 5 years ago, we were actually presented with a piece of artwork that was a rendering of our house from, we believe, the early 1940s. And on that particular rendering, there is no balustrade. It is pretty much the house in complete detail. I provided that picture to Mr. Wagner, and there is no balustrade, which got me a little bit curious. And so I started going to look in the history books that we have of the town and online to see if there was any other evidence of the balustrade being there back in that time. We have come across not much with the actual roof of the house, except for a postcard that is a rendering of the village. It's, I believe, an early photograph that was then colorized. It is available on the Kingston Improvement Association website. It is readily available on many historic postcard websites that you can purchase. And it again shows that the house in either the year 1901 or 1910, and there is a little bit of discrepancy on what year that picture was taken, that there was no balustrade there either. The roof was actually some sort of material that was either painted or stained a reddish tint, and there was no evidence of a balustrade there either. So over the years, we acquired that additional information, which also has led us to question whether or not it would be appropriate to replace. Now, the roofing companies that we had come in back in 2011 to replace the roof had indicated to us, again, that the structure that was holding the balustrade in place was wholly inappropriate. It literally was resting on the asphalt tiles. It basically was a collector of leaves and other debris that was rotting everything. And they indicated that the appropriate way to attach some kind of decorative fixture like that would be every 8 to 10 feet to drive a post, a 4x4 post, through the attic roof, bolted into the attic floor. There would be flashing on the roof, but that the life of the roof, which would normally be a 30-year roof, would be cut in at least half, if not by 2/3, by placing a hole on all 4 sides every 8 feet.
I want to interrupt you for a minute. Sorry, Catherine, but what you have been getting into, which is not what we want to do tonight, is this asking for an amendment to the certificate of appropriateness. And maybe Matt, you can help me with this. The thing is that we need to search on a process tonight. We understand that there's a lot of information that you want to deliver to us about the appropriateness of the balustrade, but that's really a subject for a discussion on amending, and we don't have an application to amend tonight. We don't have anything other than this discussion to deal with. That's
My-
why I'm recommending that, excuse me, that's why I'm recommending that be, in other words, we don't even have, Matt, anything on in terms of public notice. This is not a notice meeting about an amendment to a certificate of appropriateness. So I'm really conscious that we're stepping beyond where we want to be tonight. And we do want to actually, this is what I'm offering. We do want, I think as a commission, we do want to hear this information and we do want to evaluate it, but that may not be what's appropriate tonight to do. We need to think about the next steps that we want to take to resolve the situation, which would be, in my mind, applications to amend the 2011 certificate of appropriateness.
Mr. Youngkin, is there such an application? Because in the guidebook that was provided to us back in 2013, there is no amendment application. So what
That's
process
correct.
would
There's
be
no,
used?
amendment application. We never had, we have very few of these things, and perhaps it's a legal discussion, but that's what I see as the way to go forward, that you actually amend, you resubmit the application as an amendment, so that the stipulation that you put the balustrade back is questioned and deliberated upon, and we as a commission choose whether that's appropriate to continue with the new information or not. It could be the same for anything else you have. It could be the same for the sidelights, that the sidelights basically are irreparable and you want to do something else instead of repairing them and putting them back beside the front door. It's the same deal with that. What do you think, Matt? What's your opinion about this?
No, I don't disagree with you at all, Richard. I think that what Catherine was trying to do is to explain what the situation is. And we were looking for guidance as to how to go about trying to bring the situation into compliance. And you sort of explained that this meeting today is more of a procedural type of meeting to determine just how that should be done.
Right.
So
Maybe
with
I'll
respect
ask,
to the-
I'll ask our attorney what his opinion is. Andy?
Yeah, it's the same thing what I said. I mean, you don't have an application before you. It would be an on the balustrades, for an example, it would be an application to remove the balustrade. That's what you'd have in front of you that would have to be submitted. And the same thing with the sidelights if you want to do it. There's not a specific thing that says amendment, an application to amend, but that's simply what it would be. And that's what's not before you tonight. And that's why I was trying to deal with that more with the procedural aspects of how we're going to do this, rather than, which is what we're talking about now, rather than the merits of any particular decision on particular appurtenances.
Right.
Well, having said that, Andy and Richard, with respect to the balustrade and the sidelights, those were dealt with in the applications that were previously submitted. The other, I believe there were two other issues, although Richard mentioned something about windows below or in the foundation, but with respect to the lattice work and the AC condenser, would those be, in order to get the procedure straight, would that be submitting applications for the approval of those two components?
I believe that's
it would be-
correct.
Yeah, for the lattice work, it would be two things. It'd be the application to remove that previously designed lattice work with the archway on it and replace it with the squarish lattice work that's there now. And then with the ACs, it would just be to install the AC units where they are.
With a description of what type of screening we'd be looking to use in that location.
Absolutely, that would be helpful. Whatever screening or landscaping you're proposing would be part of that application, yes, or should be. If you're not proposing any, then you wouldn't be. But if you were proposing it, that would be part of the application.
Richard, was there another issue that you would raise?
Yeah, I think Catherine indicated in her lengthy email that some cellar windows were filled in underneath the porch. So in abundance of caution, I would put that in the application as well. That's an exterior item on the building.
Mr. Chair, if I might interrupt Brian Wagner, my understanding from that portion of Catherine's letter, is that something that happened prior to your acquisition of the property, or is that something that you did, Catherine?
The windows were literally falling into the house at the time that we bought the property, and there were animals entering the home. So yes, during the time we purchased the property, we had them filled in, and because they were windows that could not be seen from outside as they are under a porch, we filled them in with concrete block. They were not functioning as a window or any means of egress.
Understood. Just, I was misunderstanding what happened there.
So those would be separate. That would be another application for certificate of appropriateness. You could put the lattice, which you've done in the past, you could put the lattice work and the splits, the whole thing in one application for appropriateness.
So you're going to ask for two different applications, one to amend the 2011 in order to basically present the case about the balustrade and the side lights and the danger and the inappropriateness of the balustrade, et cetera, as one.
Yeah.
And then a second one that you want these other three projects on with all of the rationale.
Right. I think that would be the best way, the cleanest way to do it.
And when could we expect that to be reviewed? Because
we
I
would
can send it to
review
you
that
tomorrow
as-
if you'd like.
we would like to do that as soon as possible. As soon as we get the application, and we can set a date to review that. And I think I can poll the commission members now. I don't want to speak for them completely, so I'm going to ask you to chime in on this. And I'll start with Shanti Underhagen.
Rich, what is the question you want me to answer?
Rich, can I just try and clarify one thing, if I may?
Yes.
Jamie Rabbit. So Catherine, just again, for clarity, there are existing applications that were approved by HDC with expectations that they would be completed.
Our understanding is not that was not the way that it worked. And I'm just asking that you consider the fact that that's not our understanding of how this works.
May I finish?
Yeah.
So there was a certificate of appropriateness for the removal of side lights with the replacement of side lights. You have informed the commission that you decided not to for natural reasons. The permit to replace is still valid. So what everyone's trying to explain tonight is those certificate of appropriateness for work to be undertaken at the property still stand. They're still valid permits.
Correct.
Correct.
Absolutely correct.
To fix a roof and replace balusters. Someone applied for a permit to fix skylights and replace the skylights with what was there in like, kind, and quality. So those permits are valid. In essence, it isn't an amendment to those. It's an application to do something different than those. So it would be, you would be seeking a certificate of appropriateness to basically undo a prior application where you propose to take a historically significant side light. And now in a new application, we would be proposing to replace it with something different. That different thing happens to be what's there today. The commission would determine whether the removal of that historic feature was appropriate or not. They could rule it is, or they could rule that the prior side light is more appropriate. So it's not that you're amending something, you're asking to change that. So it's a new application. The way the commission reacts to that and either approval or denial of appropriateness will determine the path. Either side lights get replaced the way they are now, or they need to be replaced to their original feature. All of your reasons during the discussion are part of that application process. Again, what I can tell you, you have existing certificates of appropriateness that you're in essence trying to undo, and you can't undo them tonight. You can only undo them with a new application to the Historic District Commission, where they will evaluate the standards associated with those application requests under the historic nature of the property. They will determine whether the balustrades were historically appropriate, either at a point in time to the building or historic to the building when it was originally built. And then with the new things that occurred without any permits, those are other applications. I think what the chairman's explained to you is that you could put all three of those, the lattice work, the air conditioning, and the breaking up of the windows on one application. They would handle them as three different items on one application and make a determination of appropriateness. They could approve all of them, none of them, or a mix of them. So in essence, you have 5 items potentially that need to be dealt with. One is in a new application to redo something that you received appropriateness for historically, and then an application for 3 things that no permits were sought or evaluated.
I think, Jamie, you did an excellent job there summarizing it. And I think I do want to hear from the commission members, though, on this. So Shanti, do you have is that clear with you now?
Well, if the question that you're asking is, does that approach sound right to me? The answer is yes. But if it's a different question, I need the question repeated. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to, I want some, from the commission members, I want some support on this approach. I think
Yes,
we'll
I
have to
think,
figure into it.
yes. And the approach that I'm specifically supporting is what Jamie just summarized.
It's the process approach. Right.
Yes.
All right, Murray.
Yeah, it sounds like a logical approach for me as well.
Okay, Linda,
It sounds appropriate to me.
Andrew.
Yeah, the interest here is in moving forward and finding resolution. So I think this, what we're presented with is the way to do that. So yes.
All right, I think the remaining question for Catherine and for Matt and your counsel, and maybe Tom, is should this is something that you need to discuss among yourselves, really. But the question that I'm putting out to you is it appropriate for you to do this, or is it appropriate for the new owner to do this? You know, are you, I mean, maybe you've already talked about it. Go ahead.
I believe that it's already been determined that the potential new owner would like us to resolve these issues before the closing. The issue at hand is that the closing is coming very quickly. And so if I get you basically these 2 applications in the next couple of days, it would be a case of trying to find a mutually convenient time to come back together to put some resolution to this. In particular, if the decision is going to be made that we have to do something that we can't, that we may or may not be able to do before the closing. Many of the reasons is cost prohibitive, projects
Right.
for which there is no business that supports that work being done anymore. The second piece of it is just timeline. To get people to do certain projects takes time. We don't live in an economy right now where you can make 2 phone calls and get somebody to come and do work at your home in like 2 days.
Right. Well, understood. So we will try as best we can to accommodate getting together and meeting to resolve this in terms of these applications. If you can get the applications in quickly, we will act as quickly as we can to review them.
How much advertising would that require, Richard, in order to do that? Assuming it can be done quickly.
We'll ask Brian
Maybe
to
Andy,
answer
maybe
that.
Andy can answer.
This is Brian Wagner. There's no public notice requirement other than APA 48-hour meeting notice requirement. So that we just need to, it's a question of more of availability of personnel than it is of timing. Because we have to squeeze this in between other planning department meetings and nights when everybody is available.
So I think, having heard that, I think we need to hear also from Mr. Peterson. who
Guys,
is here.
Could I just add one thing before you continue? I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that in all of this, I understand that there could be a longer term goal among your commission to perhaps tighten and establish, some, more stringent requirements for this whole process for other homeowners in the future. But I'm just really hoping that we aren't held to a retroactive kind of standard where, the certificate of appropriateness that we had received did not read as a contract that we would get this work done, prior to a certain date. And it never indicated that there would be anything held against us if we were to choose to sell the property. And there was never a mention of this idea of the projects running with the land, the benefits and the burden is, I believe, what your attorney mentioned. None of that is stated in the guidebook that was provided to the homeowners here in the historic district back in 2013. None of that is stated in the certificate of appropriateness that we received in 2011. So I just want to in terms of making new policy, I'm just hoping that we're not held to something retroactively that was not in place at the time in which we pursued any of this.
Mr.
Perhaps
Chairman,
Andy,
may I
you can answer
respond?
that. Yes, why don't
Yeah,
you
I
respond
mean,
to that?
It's not that we're holding you to some kind of contract. This is a permit. You received a permit which did not include removal of the permanent removal of the side lights or permanent removal of the balustrade. And like any permit received, it would be the content of the permit you have to follow. If you had gotten a building permit, yes, it would have had to have been done within 18 months of when you pulled the permit. And there isn't that time limit on the certificate of appropriateness. And I don't think that there's an artificial one being now. The artificial time limit is put on by your aspect of the ownership. But that is nothing new. That has been all the time. It runs with the land. And if there's some permit that is open, it still applies to the next owner. Otherwise, there'd be no way. I mean, you could ask for anything, remove anything, and then sell the property, and there would be no way to protect it at all. The historic district zoning would be meaningless if those conditions, what was asked for was not held to in subsequent owners as well. So that is nothing new that's being applied to you. This is something that's being applied to everyone. When there is a request that something's been done, and that's different. And I think as Mr. Rabbit was explaining, that's the thing. You didn't apply to remove permanently the side lights or the balustrade. You applied to remove them temporarily and repair and replace them. I understand facts changed, you wanted to do it, but it was then your obligation to come before the board with an application and say, this doesn't work. Now that we've removed it, we are now asking to remove these items permanently. And that obligation was yours and still remains with you.
Does that answer your question?
Not really, but that's okay. Go ahead. You can go on.
All right, so why don't we hear from Tom Peterson?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for including me in this meeting. I think of myself as an interested observer. I entered into this agreement to purchase this property, which I very much admire and hope to be a good steward of. But we entered into a contract at a certain price prior to these issues coming to light. So yes, Catherine's correct that there is now a contingency that these issues are resolved before we reach closing. And that's, goes back to the very first question, Richard, that you asked Andrew, which was about those responsibilities and liabilities for transferring to the new owner. And as you can imagine, as anyone who's making a purchase like this, I want to understand what am I exactly getting into if there are obligations that are transferring over to me. So with that said, I would hope that we could come to a conclusion when this prior to its closing. And I think there's really two issues. One is what's it going to cost to resolve it appropriately, and the other is time. And the only thing I can say on that is that I am open to working with the new owners on potentially taking on some of those liabilities if, you know, if we can't do it before the close, but that would be something that we would have to negotiate once we understand what the agreement that you guys have come to and what, you know, what that costs and what does that all entail. I can't commit to anything until I understand what it is.
So the question about running with the land, you understand that then, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay. And that in fact, if you were to assume the certificate of appropriateness of 2011, you would also assume the timing of it, which is now very graceful in terms, it seems to me it's at a time when you could accomplish it, given resources that you might or might not have. See what I mean? These certificates will run with the land as they are if nothing is done. The 2011 certificate will run with the land as it is, which means that it doesn't have a time period attached to it.
Right. Well, I would need to consult with my lawyer about that. And I wasn't really prepared to really speak at this meeting. I was really thought I was just observing, but I would just, the immediate thing I would think of is that I don't want to run into a similar issue as the current owners are if I go to sell at some point. So I prefer that we have some clarity as to what needs to be done and the time frame that needs to be done. And while I appreciate the flexibility, I'm sure everyone does. So, you know, I think it's better to be clear about it than not.
Well, I think then that we probably have discussed enough with everybody involved. We know that there's a sales agreement. We don't want to get involved in any of that. That's your business, not our business. We just wanted you to be absolutely an understanding of what this is, so that you guys can work it out between yourselves. Yes. Any other comments? Have we concluded this business then? Have we reached an understanding? I don't want to leave this item on the agenda unless we're all in agreement that this is the way that we want to go and we're comfortable. Do I
I
have,
think we all understand what has to be done, Richard.
so you guys are okay? Anybody else? Do I have any other comments from the commission or from the staff? I think, Brian, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just say that Matt and Catherine, if you can get us the application paperwork as soon as possible, one copy physical on paper, one copy electronic, I will work to get it out to everybody so that they have as much time as possible to consider it. We do already have a meeting that is on the books for next week. I'm not suggesting that you get materials in for that meeting because that's an issue that may take a while in and of itself. But we could probably get you in the following week, the week after next. So that gives you time to pull everything together and get it submitted. You know, we don't want to stand in the way of the sale any more than we absolutely have to. And we want to make sure that a lot of the new information that Catherine's bringing to bear is fairly and appropriately considered. And that will sort out Mr. Peterson's concerns about knowing exactly, you know, what the requirements are going to be for him should he decide to proceed with the sale.
Richard, just point of clarification, the planning department is not involved in whether the sale goes through or doesn't go through. Our process is devoid of that discussion. I'm not aware of discussions that have been had by our department with either party about the contract or sales agreement. We're strictly looking at compliance with prior approvals.
Right. Yeah, that's our position as well.
If questions, you know, inform property owners that those prior commitments run with the property and they purchase If you purchase a property with standing permits on it, you inherit those permits. If you acquire a property that has some permit issues, you inherit those permit issues also.
Yeah, very good. In terms of helping or getting this going, any commission members have thoughts on what I'm talking about, sort of things that Catherine should supply us, information she should supply us in this application. I'm thinking she's got the historical photographs. If she has any more information anyone can think of that would help in making the determination.
I would like to see clearer images of that postcard and the artist rendering. Right now, the way they were presented to us, they were kind of layered upon each other. If each could be shown individually, so that I can get a better read on each image.
They were two separate files, so perhaps that was just some way in which it was provided to you. They were two separate photos.
Okay.
Andrew, I might actually be able to help a little bit on that, because those postcards look very familiar from some research I did in the library in Peacedale. So they may actually have some of those things over in the Peacedale library. I could go take a look.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever you can do to make them legible, and whatever context would be great.
Yeah. Anybody else have a request of Catherine? I have one. If anybody else, Shanti?
No,
No.
I'm, just as much background information as possible, including historic photographs.
Right. All right. So I think if you, Catherine, if you could just make a note of this. If you go to Betty Cotter's book on Kingston, Images of America, you've probably seen this. It's one of those.
I don't believe I have that book.
Yeah, well, you can find it at the Kingston Library, but actually
I have a library card, so.
the photograph is from the Pettiquomscot Historical Society. So it's at South County History Center. I think if you talk to Erica Luke, she'd be able to find it for you. It's a picture of the house that's, I think, a 19th century picture that shows it in the front of it. So we can determine more from that picture. The balustrade
What's
is.
the name of the author, please?
It's Betty Cotter, Bettycotter. And so Erica may have some more photographs in a range of periods that might be useful. Just check in with her. Photographs are always great, historical photographs. So thank you very much. I appreciate that we all got together to talk about this. Appreciate that you had Matt Callahan here and that we were able to get Andy on board, Catherine, and I do hope that everything works out well for this. We speak for the buildings and we always look after them. We know from your email that you've had your own problems too, or issues with the B&B, and
I'm not really sure what email
understand
you're
that.
referring to. I didn't actually send an email, so. Great.
Well, it was a communication that we have online. It's
Okay.
yeah, it's part of the record. So with that, I think we can move on to our next item on the agenda, which is 4B. We don't have much more time. We're going to end this meeting by 7, certainly. So you all can stay for that, or you can leave.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Matt. And that item is general discussion of HCC programs, discussion on different HCC outreach programs, including community guidance on National Register applications, local preservation awards and programs to identify endangered properties. This was brought to our agenda by Murray, who requested that we have a discussion about this. And it's something that if we do have time, I'd love to talk about it, maybe for 5 minutes or so, depending upon your interest. And so with that, I don't know, Jamie, do you want to say anything before, if you want to take off?
Thanks, Richard. Thank you for allowing me to attend your meeting tonight and participate.
It's always a pleasure. It's fabulous that you can come. It really is.
Thank you for, the level-headed decisions. And again, I think you summed it up in a comment. You speak for the buildings, Richard, and it's really not about the property owners. You're the voice of the building and the structure.
Yeah.
I have to step off briefly to assist a 13-year-old with his homework. So again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And I don't know if Andy, if we need you to stay on board, if you want to take off, but you're welcome to stay with us.
You're in good hands.
Yeah.
I have a few more minutes.
Oh, good.
Before
Good.
I have to
Good.
get off.
Well, maybe we can now, Murray, why don't you go ahead and describe what your thoughts are about this?
Sure. And as a interviewed in front of the town council about my potential position on this board, I expressed to them that although I've lived in Kingston, had lived in Kingston, right on the outskirts of the historic district for 20 years, and very familiar with it. But my real, quite honestly, my real desire about participating on the board had less to do with augmenting what I think is already a very rich background and set of experiences with you folks as to how to treat the Kingston community. And it had more to do with acting upon the numerous items that have been in our comprehensive plan since 2010 at least, repeated in each of the iterations, a little bit differently perhaps, but for the most part, there's been a constant desire to have this board play a large role in accentuating the importance of our historic architecture throughout the town, not just in Kingston, but throughout the town. So again, I'm very hopeful that I can play a role and work with the rest of the board members in helping to do that. And my request for Rich to put this on the agenda was to really just start the conversation. My thoughts on this have been that, if we create a calendar of sorts where we have a realistic set of activities that we're able to work on and introduce to the townspeople, that over a period of time, and this is the ultimate objective, right? The ultimate objective is to raise the awareness of the importance of historic architecture, and to provide ourselves as a resource to people that are interested in preserving historic architecture, either theirs or more broadly in the community. Some of the ideas and activities that have been talked about, I'm sure by you folks and certainly by other people in the town, have been things like putting together a list of endangered properties, or giving awards to different individuals within the town that have done some really exceptional things. I can't remember whether or not this board, for example, acknowledged Arnold Lumber. I know Preserve Rhode Island, I think it was, that sent an award to them. But those types of things, I think, would go a long way of curing what I believe to be an ailment within our town, which is to have some great historic resources, but having a lot of people that are very apathetic towards our historic architecture. You had mentioned Erica Luke. I think we at different points in time have been in jeopardy of losing Erica as a great resource, because she is so dismayed at the lack of desire by this town to invest more of their time and their resources in preserving historic architecture. And I only bring up her because she's somewhat of an outsider. She's only been around for a little while, and yet she's walked away after having dealt with preservation issues for the last 5 to 10 years with that opinion of our town, and I think it's an accurate one. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be too long-winded, because I know you wanted this to be a brief conversation, so I'll shut up.
Well, I think we can have a conversation and continue it too, because these are very, very strongly, I feel these things as well. And we do have, just for your information, Marie, we do have a program of granting awards, and we did give an award to the branch, the Arnolds. And we have given an award to Stedman's too for their bicycle shop, which I think is terrific. And these awards have not been, for historic preservation purity. I think we've long since thought that the whatever we can get is good in terms of some interest in historic preservation. So we're not looking for the absolute best possible restoration project. We're looking for, in these awards, for good, wholesome projects where buildings are saved and reused and rehabbed. I love the idea of endangered properties and how to voice that in such a way that it's not offensive, that we're actually just pointing out properties that are in jeopardy. I think in a small town, and this South Kingstown's big in land mass, but small in sort of its perspectives sometimes. And so I think we need to be very careful about being negative and being more positive. We've always thought that being more positive was better than being negative. There are also these the town buildings, and I'm a proponent for asking the town to be leaders, to have a leadership role in best practices for historic preservation. If we could have town-owned properties done and repaired, rehabbed, reused, preserved in the very best way possible when they need it. I mean, these are the important, historically important town buildings. Those are my thoughts, and sort of the mechanics of how we go about doing it become important. Wondered if anybody else on the board has ideas about the mechanics and how we can move forward. We're doing the awards now. We've got the message out for all commission members to think about projects that we can give awards to in 2021. And we do have a certificate. We're sort of on that pathway, but maybe there's some other things that we could do that would be meaningful along your lines. Any thoughts from other board members?
I guess my question, this would go to Brian. If we were to speak to or about any particular building, would we need to advertise that in the minutes if we want to say each meeting we're going to talk about a particular structure, like move through a list as we go through a meeting? Do we have to advertise that in advance?
Yes, you do. You have to post that on
So-
your agenda if you're going to be talking about particular properties.
Mhm.
In fact, I will tell you that the discussion item that you're currently discussing is dangerously broad. I'm not saying it's illegally so. I think it complies with the Open Meeting Act, but kind of just barely because it's so broad. So you do need to be more specific, particularly if you're looking at particular properties. You need to identify them, or particular neighborhoods if you're going to do it that way. That's another way to do it.
Yeah, very good advice here.
So
Well,
you're saying,
how do you brainstorm if we have to
Right.
be more precise?
that's what, yeah.
Well, I
Hi,
think
Chris.
we have to structure the agenda a little bit more precisely to do that. Maybe it's the project we actually say we're going to talk about endangered properties, and we actually list some, and that becomes acceptable in terms of a posted item. I think that's where Andy's going, correct, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just say you're going to discuss endangered properties and develop a list of them, I guess you could do that without, particularly if you don't have any particular on mind. But then realize that your discussion is mainly just, okay, these are the ones we have to add to the list. And then you would have another meeting where you'd probably say, okay, these are the ones we've initially identified and we're going to be discussing, because you would need to give the owners of those properties an opportunity if they wanted to come and discuss it as well. And they would have no idea what you were looking at if you didn't give them some advance notice.
Right. It's all tailored around also that we may be speaking about properties that are not within the Kingston zoning district, that we're talking about properties that are much further afield and are not covered by any overlay district, zoning
Well, I
overlay
think you
district.
could also cover that in, the idea that you're want to consider the idea of recommending outlying properties being separately designated.
So, and also Murray is talking about items in the comprehensive plan that give us advisory capacities and other sort of more general, I guess, advisory kind of role to the town. And so when we talk about those individually, we may want to itemize them out. Like tonight, we're going to talk about this role that's in the comprehensive plan on this page. And we want to, for instance, if we want to offer support to X, Y, and Z board and commission, we get more specific about that as a discussion item. That's the way I feel that maybe we can move forward, and we take up, maybe if we have room on our agenda, we take up one of these for each meeting that we have, that is, so we don't overwhelm, or we can have a meeting that's just about this stuff, and be very careful about how we put the agenda together. So I think if there's any more ideas about this that we can, that are sort of along the lines of what we posted. Shanti, do you have any more?
I don't. I like Murray's enthusiasm and energy for it, though. Maybe he can transfer a little to me, because, it's not an area where I'm hugely, I mean, I know it's a great idea. I know it's important. And so, but if someone like Murray and you, Rich, can lead it and help frame it, I'm not good with the big picture of this sort of thing.
Brian has his hand up.
Yeah, I when we spoke earlier today, Richard, I think I sort of mentioned, we have our regular quarterly meeting coming up in May, and we may want to use that meeting as an opportunity for some housekeeping. As I mentioned, I think Shanti and I have both said something about maybe making some updates to the rules of procedure. We've discussed over the course of the last couple of certificates of appropriateness of coming up with a stronger form with consistent terms that address things like, time to comply, and other issues that I think we need some additional clarity on, and we could sort of do some procedural housekeeping in May.
Right. I think that's excellent. Everybody just nodding their heads. I think that's good. You too, Linda, right? I'm looking at you. Yeah. Good. So,
yeah. So if anybody can think of anything that, maybe has been sticking in the back of your head over the last couple of years about the way things have been done that maybe need to be updated or approved, feel free to contact me, call me, email me. We can talk about it, and we can see if we can put something on that May 6th agenda to deal with it.
all right. I think are you happy now, Murray? We've talked about it. We've got it organized a little bit better.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I guess the only other thing I'll throw out there, amongst things that I think could be important and interesting, is the update to the survey. And I'm sure you guys have talked about this in the past, and maybe at that next meeting we can have that as an item as well. As how do we make that happen?
Yes, I actually, what we'll do is Brian and I will talk about that. There is some survey effort going on. We'll talk about perhaps getting Erica Luke to come to the meeting and present. That might be a good idea. And there are other thoughts about survey work. It's very, very important to do. So any other comments on this before we move on?
Just Andy again.
Yep.
Since you're talking about, dairy initiatives and continuing education opportunities, remind you about the statewide preservation conference that's coming up in another 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
And they have a lot of sessions Wednesday afternoon, a couple of which I'll be at.
Yeah. Well, thank you,
presenting.
Andy. Thank you. We want the board members to go to that meeting. And Brian, if you can send out another reminder, I would love all of the board members to go. I'm going. It's great to get a refresher course. There's always something new to be learned, and it's neat to be with all the other people who are trying to do what we're doing. from other towns, that these special sessions on historic district zoning and being a commission member, very important that we go to these and get refreshed on our roles and our duties and our responsibilities and how we should be running our meetings. And also on that note, I almost forgot, the town council is going to be reviewing a comprehensive plan on April 12th. And it would be very good if all of us went to that and participated to some degree. You feel comfortable, but I think it requires going to the comprehensive plan itself, the draft, and looking at our roles and what we've talked about over the years that's been developed, 3 years or so. It's had a lot of input from the Historic District Commission over those years in clarifying what we could do. So those items in there that refer to us have been vetted with the commission itself, and we need to support that. I'm pretty sure it's fine, but we just need to be there to support it. So I think without further ado, we should move on to the next items. Item 5, correspondence and public comments. I don't believe we have any. Update from the staff on the planning department activities. Is there an update, Brian?
Yeah, just quickly on that. No correspondence, no update on anything new since our last meeting last week on planning department activity.
Right. Our next regular meeting is for Thursday, May 6th, but we do have in the works a special meeting on the South Road.
Next Wednesday, April 14th for the South Road application.
Okay, and
that agenda will not go out until Friday or possibly Monday, because I know we're waiting for the applicant to submit some additional materials. So I'll give them some time to get that in so that I can link it all into the agenda.
Right. And it seems like we're busy. So that's a good thing, I think, actually,
Okay,
and
so,
to be celebrated. Yep.
Coming
Andy?
back, you have a meeting on the 14th,
Yeah, April 14th.
and that's for which one?
That's to review, it's a continuation really of a review of a new house proposed for South Road.
Okay,
Um,
because that's, I'm just looking, I don't see it on our calendar here as far as anyone from the solicitor's office being.
Andy, as far as I have been involved, we don't typically have counsel at our meetings. And tonight we had a special need to make sure that we had your expertise here.
Okay.
Certainly, you're all welcome.
It doesn't sound like, if it's a new house there, it doesn't sound like it. Obviously, please do coordinate with me with 2545 Kingston Road. Once that comes back on the special meeting, let's please try to coordinate with my schedule as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Andy, thank you very much, Andy. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm going to say goodnight now. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
Night, Andy.
Thank
Good
you.
night, Andy.
Right.
And so I guess we can have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We have a
A
second.
second.
Linda seconds. Thank you very much. I think all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Roll
Aye.
call. Aye. Thank you,
Thank-
Brian, as
Thank you very
usual.
much, everybody.
Wonderful.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
night.
Andrew. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Mary. Thank you,
Thank you.
Shanti.
Thank you, Rich. Good sharing. Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.